the objective of Rise is to help people dig deeper, is to ask more nuanced questions about the state of the world and tourism's place in it, and how do we contribute to that, and how do we, once we recognize that it is a harmful system, how do we help dismantle it and build a better one.
Hey, it's Yulia, and this is Going Places, a show about fascinating places near and far, and the people who make them better. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is your host, Yulia Denisiuk. Today, part 2 of our conversation with Vincie Ho, a social justice educator and an incredible leader in travel who founded Rise Travel Institute. If you missed last week's episode, be sure to catch up with the first part of our conversation with Vincie, in which we discussed what it was like for her growing up in Hong Kong, why capitalism leaves little space for activism in our lives, and why there are still so very few conversations about decolonizing travel in the tourism space. Today, we continue our powerful conversation. We discuss how Rise creates tools for people to think critically about the places they travel to, why Vincie no longer uses the word destination, what a 17th century cartographer has to do with our understanding of the world, and how mass tourism follows in the colonial footsteps. We'll also discuss what gives Vincie hope and what you, our listener, can do to stay engaged in the face of a relentless assault on our humanity that seems to be coming at us from all directions these days. If you haven't already, be sure to check out one of the resources that Rise Travel Institute has put together. It's a free ebook called Decolonial Guide to Travel for a Conscious Traveler. Inside this ebook, you're going to find critical questions that bring the impact of colonization into the now through the concept of neocolonialism. After going through this well-crafted and thoughtful resource, you won't look at travel or any other activity humans do on scale the same ever again. This ebook centers the voices of Rise collaborators who are themselves amazing leaders in travel, like Justine Abigail Yu, who was on our show last season, and Alex Reynolds, who was our guest at the beginning of this season. You can find the link to this guide in our show notes. Rise Travel Institute is our founding member, and I could not have been more proud and honored to have the support of this organization, whose work is critically needed in travel and beyond. If you feel inspired by the ideas we've brought you this year, please consider supporting us as a paid member. We literally cannot do this work without the help of our members like Vincie and Rise, who decided to support us at the highest level, but also members like Anne and Betsy and Brian and Kimberly, who chip in a little bit every month. You can become a Going Places member for as little as $6 a month, and there are lots of perks associated with our membership, like getting on a group call with me every month to ask questions, get advice, and be in community with each other. Go to goingplacesmedia.com to check it out and see how you can join us. And while you're there, you will see that we just announced our trip to Okinawa this November. It's a very special trip for 6 people only, and it's for women and women-identifying travelers this time, because we will be following in the footsteps of the goddess who created the island of Okinawa, according to Ryukyu beliefs, meeting with Okinawan women priestesses and performing ancient rituals in an Okinawan sauna. See more details and to book your spot for a November trip, go to goingplacesmedia.com/Okinawa. All right, now on to the second and final part of our 2-part conversation with Vincie. So speaking of hope then, let's talk about what you guys are doing at Rise, because again, there's a lot of very important work that's happening in the realm of travel that Rise Institute is leading, actually. And I invite our listeners to go online, and we'll link to all the programs and everything that you're doing. But the way I see it is you have 3 big things that you're working on. One is your flagship program, which is a self-paced study that has incredible lessons. Like, I'll just read you a couple of lesson names. One lesson is locating ourselves in the spectrum of power. So that tells you everything you need to know about the kind of conversation you would have with respect to, traveling and learning or unlearning, I should say.
Mhm.
Another one that you have is called Our Impact on Indigenous Land and People. So really wonderful conversations. And also, I love that you actually bring collaborators who are themselves amazing leaders in the space, like Justine Abigail Yu, who was on our podcast in the last season, Alex Reynolds, who's been on the show recently. But I actually want to talk a little bit about the ebook that you have, because that is a very accessible way for everyone to get into these conversations. And it's a free ebook that you guys have put together. It's called Pathways to Equity, a decolonial guide for travelers. And we'll also link to it. I encourage everyone to check it out. What I really love about that particular ebook is that it really brings this conversation of colonialism into the now versus, oh, it's something that happened in the past and it's something that we learn about in history books. No, you actually bring it forward in really unpacking how we are living in the legacy of it and continuation of it
Mhm.
right now. So I thought that was just so crucial to read and to access.
Thank you so much for appreciating it. It's yeah. Let's start with the ebook, and then I'll also tell you or share more about the flagship program and other things that we do in the pipeline. So yeah, the ebook was a project that we worked on for over a year, from discussing the concept of putting together ebook, like what do we want to talk about. At the beginning, it was supposed to be like a short infographic style thing, and then it just blew up into a 90-page ebook because there's so much about this, and we do not want to dumb it down. We do not want to simplify, because the objective of Rise is to help people dig deeper, is to ask more nuanced questions about the state of the world and tourism's place in it, and how do we contribute to that, and how do we, once we recognize that it is a harmful system, how do we help dismantle it and build a better one. So yeah, we spend so much time on researching and putting together, and also like structuring the different parts, offering definitions of like what it means by colonialism. What does it have to do with tourism? People don't necessarily see the connection, right? As you said, like most people would think of colonization or colonialism as a thing of the past. Well, not only it is not a thing of the past, we still have settler colonialism right now happening as we speak, right? And then there is also, the legacy of colonialism that is still impacting societies around the world. And by and tr when we travel to those places, what do we need to understand in order to be able to interact with the place and the communities in the most thoughtful way? And then there's neocolonialism as this concept of modern day tourism, like going places and like taking over, extracting, using resources, and so on. I think in the entire ebook, what I personally really like is the part on the reflective questions. If you still remember, there's a whole part on the typical tourist would be think this way, and then Rise would come in and say, hey, what about looking at this from a different angle? And these are the resources, or these are the questions that can help you think more deeply about this behavior or decision or action or concept. And back to what you said earlier about the use of the word destination, we actually have that discussion in the ebook. To us at Rise Travel Institute, we retired this word. Like we intentionally choose not to use the word anymore. We understand why the tourism industry is still using it, and sometimes because we are talking with industry people, so we do still use that word because that's what people understand. But to us, when we call a place a destination, we are commodifying the place. We are commodifying the place for tourist consumption. And so that means we're not actively recognizing that the place we go to is other people's homes, and they have a relationship to their land and to their ecosystems, and we are there just as guests. And so when we use the word destination, really gives a sense
It
of
is there for your
it is
consumption.
there for
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's almost like, oh, okay, you're going to the supermarket, you choose an item. It's like, okay, I go on the map and then I pick a destination. It really perpetuates that kind of colonial, imperial, and capitalistic thinking. So we don't want to. Well, first of all, we decide that it doesn't fit our own ethical standards, so we decide not to use it, and we encourage people to think more when they use it. But we do not, again, we do not shame people who continue to use it because either they don't know or they can't see the undertones or the reason why it is harmful. And also a lot of local communities at tourism destinations, they keep do like, they keep using the word too, because again, like, that's how we got socialized into the kind of terminologies, the kind of language that we use. But at Rise Travel Institute, we would we have been avoiding using this word at all cost.
That, and I mean, decolonizing process needs to happen in everyone's minds. Everyone, like you said, has been socialized into that. I think for me, what was really interesting about the ebook, I loved learning. There's a ton of facts also in the book that I really loved. For example, you talk about that there are still 17 places in the world that remain under colonial rule. And you mentioned places like British Virgin Islands, for example, very much a tourist place, and also something like Western Sahara, which is a place barely anyone talks about. And by the way, we have an episode this season about Western Sahara, so very much looking forward to that. I also learned that, you had this other fact about tourism leakage, which is this statistic that for every 100 hours spent in a developing country, only 5 stays there. I mean, when I saw that, that is wild. That is literally one of the best probably examples of how tourism continues to perpetuate colonial standards.
Exactly.
And then things like the Mercator projection, which I've heard of that one before, but it was just really very nicely done, where you talk about how we use these maps that were originated by, I think, a 17th century cartographer that has a very Eurocentric view of the world, and it continues to shape how we see countries today too. So I mean, it's just, I really encourage everyone to go and download the ebook and spend some time with it yourself, because it's just such a again, I don't see this very often, a resource like this, conversations like this in our space, in the travel space. And so it's brilliant to be exposed to it and to start thinking about it. And I also want to reiterate what you said earlier, that the goal here is not to shame people, to say, oh, like, how can you do this, or like, you're no, it's like we're all on this spectrum of advancement, or like awakening or whatnot, or becoming more critical thinkers. If you talk to me, maybe even like as recently as 5 years ago, or maybe like 6 years ago, I would have very little to say on a lot of these topics, right? I have advanced, or I have progressed in my understanding of the world. And so we're all on that spectrum, but it's like opening that door to people and saying, hey, come check this out. This is very interesting and important.
Thank you so much for saying that. It absolutely is a journey, right? Like 5 years ago, you may not be thinking about these things that we are talking about today, right? Or maybe it wouldn't have been as important or as a priority to you. And we're all learning. Even Rise Travel Institute as an organization, we had the word destination in our vision statement when we first started. We had to, last year, like we had a strategic planning exercise. We were like reviewing our approach, we were reviewing our mission and vision statement. It wasn't in our let's say it wasn't in our objective to rebrand or anything, but as we grow, as we progress, as you said, things are different. Like we learned that some things that we used to say or do may be harmful. So guess what? We stop saying and doing it, right? And so
Yeah, we are allowed to evolve.
we are allowed to evolve, we're allowed to make mistakes, and there's no need to hide it. I think when you acknowledge that I wouldn't say a mistake, but like it wasn't, let's say, the amount of things that we knew was not adequate, and we continue to evolve and continue to learn, right? And so back in the days, we used the word destination in our vision statement. And 2 years ago, we decided that we had to come up with something that is closer, like more aligned to our beliefs and to what we do. And so we also moved away from just talking about sustainable travel to really center equity and justice in our mission statement now.
I love that. And by the way, I think the word that you're using now instead of destination is host community or host
Mhm.
country to
Mm.
really hone in the idea that we are visiting as guests to places where people live, and keeping that in mind. That's amazing. There is another word that I have my own sort of challenges with and I don't use. And for me, that word is locals, actually.
Mhm. Mhm.
I've talked about this in the past a bit because I'm okay with the word local as an adjective, like a local organization, local restaurant, local cafe. But when you say locals, that to me is part of that sort of dynamic or that sort of consumptive mind frame
Mhm.
where, oh, they're locals, and
Right.
it almost like exotifies it. I don't know. I've always had a challenge with that word and I could never put my finger on it precisely, but I kind of stay away with from that.
That's a very interesting take. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I I haven't I haven't stopped using the word locals as a noun, but I would always make sure that people understand that even within the local population, there's so much diversity. Like when we talk about the local population, who are the locals? Like who do you consider as locals? There are indigenous people. There are people who born and raised there but not indigenous, right? And then you have immigrants. You have so many immigrant communities that also make up the fabric of a place. And so like when you look at the United States, the diversity is really one of our assets. And how do you define someone as a local or not a local? Like when you say the local, what do you mean? Right. And so I think people need to dig deeper.
I love that. I think actually that's one of the reasons why locals by itself doesn't feel right for me. It's because it lumps everybody together, right? It doesn't allow for that sort of nuance
Exactly.
of groups. It's interesting. I've been spending a lot more time on Canadian websites lately. For some reason, I've just been like doing some research for the new platform that we've launched,
Hmm.
and by the way, here's also just a reminder to everyone that Going Places Media is now a reader supported publication. So you guys can check out, all these conversations that we're having and a lot more on the platform. But as an inspiration, I would say, actually, I've been going to a lot of different Canadian websites and I love how much more advanced they are
Hmm.
in this idea of using language and precise words, because language is important. Why are we spending so much time talking about the word destination or talking about the word locals? It's because language matters, right? It shapes our understanding of reality oftentimes. And so in some of these Canadian websites, I will never forget, there's this one Canadian photographer that I came across his work, and I go to his website to check out his work. And on the footer of his website, it says, I am a white settler. I'm a white colonial settler on such and such traditional unceded homelands of such and such, right? I don't remember
Hmm.
exactly, but I was like, wow, a
Right.
white dude in Canada is saying, I'm a white colonial settler. Damn, like we are not there yet in the
No.
United States.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're not there yet. We're far from there,
We're
unfortunately.
going to the other direction.
We're going to see the other direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean that just goes to show that again, the work that you guys are doing is really important. I actually want to talk. We're not going to talk about your flagship program in the interest of time, because again, there's a lot that you guys do, but I invite people to come and check it out. I do want to touch a bit about your experiential journeys, because I think that's also a very interesting way in which you're approaching it,
Mhm.
because basically your journeys, which is your trips that you take to different places around the world, I love that there is a prerequisite to joining your trips.
Mm-hmm.
That is
Mm.
to participate in your flagship program, which is something that I haven't really seen done a lot. So basically, you're inviting people into these concepts, and then you actually go with them and experience them on the ground. And I just thought that was so brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, so that is exactly the idea. We see the flagship program as a way to prepare people's readiness to shift their mindset regarding how they travel and understand what conscious travel really means. And then they get to give them all the tools and also the space to really talk about issues. And then we take our group of alumni to experience conscious travel on the ground, as you said. And okay, so there are a few things here. First of all, yeah, we can put together trips, but we're an educational organization and we're not a tour operator. So when we do a trip, it has to what well, let's say when we first had this idea of like doing the experiential journeys, we asked ourselves like why do we there are so many tours or trips out there already. Why do we want to add one to the vast number of tours that exist already? Why do we want to do this? And the motivation is exactly like you said, like we want to be able to provide a chance for our alumni to really experience, conscious travel firsthand and also giving them the example of what indigenous-led tourism means or like what conscious travel, thoughtful travel really means. And so in the itinerary, we would always have like a daily debrief and we take our participants into like really deep conversations about what they experienced prior, like, during the day and how to connect what they experienced to larger societal issues happening locally and globally and also um invite them to look inward and see how like whether the experience helped them understand their privilege and identity. Yeah, so we see the experiential journey as a way to let our students, our participants experience what they've learned, and also as a direct way to support indigenous tourism and support sustainable and ethical travel activities or experiences, rather than just talking about theories. But we also want to have a means to directly support the people that we want to support, and so that is what we do. We went to Guatemala in 2022. We went to Mexico in 2024. And this year we're planning to go to India. And we're so fortunate to have Dr. Anu Taranath, actually, the author of Beyond Good Trips, to come with us and be the tour instructor. So with her, she would be facilitating like deep conversations and critical conversations about the experience and also how the experience fits into the larger picture of the social system of India, that we're going to. We want to make sure that we work with a value aligned local partner. So like within our own professional network, we know X amount of sustainable tour operators, and we have a very vigorous vetting process. We would just really try to understand how they are aligned with us on every single thing. It's not just because they say that they're sustainable, is we want to make sure that they really have a justice lens to approach each of their products. So that makes our experiential journey special.
What I'm going to take away from our conversation is that really like bringing that justice lens to travel conversations, and it's given me a very helpful way to think about it because I've been feeling it, but I haven't had the words to put it into, if that makes sense. Like I've been feeling the injustice and the sort of the craziness of being in this field and continuing business as usual.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
now I have the words to explain it. It's bringing the justice lens to this industry and to the sphere, and I love that so much. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. That's exactly what most tourism practitioners and sustainable tourism professionals who have been through our program say it's not like most of them have been doing the work, right? Like, if they are if they're attracted to our flagship program, that's because they care about these issues and they want to dive deeper. And so most of our participants, or like, students, they're already pretty advanced in on the sustainable travel journey. It's not like we're giving them like a lot of new things, but I think what we've been able to offer is really to provide the language for you to work with, like the language to better articulate, better communicate your goals and why you're doing things the way you do and why you're making certain decisions. So that if you're working with consumers or if you're working with destination partners, like you would be able to use that language, to talk about your objective and how you like why you're designing your products the way you do.
Vincie, if I just imagine the situation, some tourism board and some partners, people in the room, and somebody says justice oriented travel, and just earth shatters everywhere, because that is not something that, oh,
I
I guess
know.
I shouldn't
Yeah.
say that. I actually, no, I shouldn't say that. No, let's cut this out, because I also know I've been talking to a lot of indigenous groups
Mm-hmm.
who are trying to change the way things are done and trying to really lead. And
No, but I understand that. Well, I also understand that. I see where you're coming from because, to be realistic, we know
mainstream, I guess, mainstream.
mainstream. Yeah, yeah. The word justice is very intimidating, right? Like people do find our work intimidating because we talk about justice, because we talk about decolonization. And some people may actually appreciate the content, but they may find these terms like a little bit like aggressive, And so I totally get that, especially if you need to work with destination stewardship organizations and build relationships. Some people or some organizations may prefer to have like a more mellow approach, calling it, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of like different terms like thoughtful travel, like meaningful travel, and all these, but we are basically doing the same thing. Like our end goal is similar, is we're aligned, but we do take a more quote unquote radical approach because we think it is necessary to be able to talk about it. If you don't use the word decolonization, you are not recognizing that our world is shaped by colonialism. So to us, it is important. So that is the choice that we made as an organization.
I love that. So I want to leave us in a hopeful place.
Okay.
I want to leave every episode in a hopeful place, because again, the whole idea behind the season and behind the new platform that we have is cultivating hope. And so I want to leave us with this question. Somebody listening to us right now and thinking about all these things, and again, sometimes it feels overwhelming. There's too many terrible things also happening in the United States, but also abroad. How can someone stay engaged? How can someone feel like they are doing something good and doing something to help us go back to the more just, more peaceful, more better world for all of us? What would you say be, and I guess I'm not asking for like sort of some big grand action, because that's also
Mhm.
not very realistic or sustainable, but what would be your tips, or maybe how are you approaching this yourself
Yeah.
in this time?
This is a big question that I'm gonna also ask my students tonight when I have my human rights class. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think we need to give ourselves some grace. It is overwhelming. It is very like what is going on is very heavy. And no one should be guilt tripped into thinking that, you know, I mean, we should not, let's put it this way. Activism takes many different forms. I mean, some people would take to the streets, right? And some people would be making calls to their local representatives. Some people maybe, I don't know, like trying to get people to sign petitions and things like that. But activism really takes a lot of different forms. It could be
Checking on your neighbor, for
checking on
example.
your neighbors, exactly, exactly, or having a conversation with your kids so that they understand what's going on better, so that when they become voters, your conversation with them today may influence the way they decide to vote in the future. And so little things, like, it doesn't have to be big things, but don't beat ourselves up because sometimes we do need to take a break. It is very overwhelming, but don't let that like weigh you down. And sometimes, like, the more you disengage, the more you disconnect, the more you feel overwhelmed, because you would be worried if you really genuinely care. I'm talking about people who care. If you genuinely care about the world, you may worry about not knowing what has happened the whole time that you disconnected, right? And you panic and you don't know what to do. And I think, like, staying informed is important, and it is already a form of activism. But of course, you need to find a way to take care of your mental health. Let's say right now, what my partner and we have been trying to do is, in the morning we always would always read news, but then at night I'm like, okay, no, I just want to watch a Netflix series. Like, I cannot just like put all my energy into that, because that's draining, and that's also not healthy. And so, yeah, staying informed is important, I would say. Yeah, like, find your allies and have a support system, build a community so that you can talk about things, talk about issues, and learn from one another. um Again, there are so many different forms of activism. It could just be supporting people who go out there, like supporting people who want to be more active. Sometimes there are also genuine or legitimate fears that prevent someone from, let's say, participating in a protest because it's not safe for them, or because they cannot afford to lose a job because they have kids to raise, right? And so there are legitimate fears and concerns for a lot of people, unfortunately, because, again, as you said, this society is set up in such a way that there are things that you need to worry about and that you need to prioritize that actually take away your energy that you could otherwise invest in social change, right? And so recognizing that is important. And yeah, I don't really have an answer to that question. I think we just need to stay informed and also look up to, I mean, I love to find stories that make me feel hopeful. Yes, we look at politicians who are corrupt and who've been doing awful things, but look at who are still out there trying to mobilize and dedicating their time and using their sphere of the power of influence to still be doing something and organizing, and that is helpful, to me. And then, of course, whether or not, like, a movement is legitimate, and looking at who's leading it, and this, I mean, there's so many layers to all those things too, if we want to dig deep into it. But in general, like, seeing people like the protest this past weekend, the hands-off protests, there has been, like, some debate about, like, who's organizing it, why is the law enforcement not deployed, you know, as proportionately as it would have been, like, in other, like, Palestinian protests, for example. Why, we need to learn, we need to ask ourselves why, and continue to question things. And on the other hand, by being at the protest, I saw, like, many elders in their 60s and 70s joining the protest, many of them for the first time in their lives, because they couldn't, they can't take it anymore. They were marching in their walkers, in their canes, and, like, having signs. One of the most powerful signs that I saw was, "My grandparents fought fascism so that I didn't have to, but then here I am now." It's just like, wow. And then also in protests, you see, back in 2019, also in Hong Kong, like, when there's oppression, you see creativity thrive. Like, all these very creative slogans and banners, and wall art. That's a way people resist. So resistance really do take a lot of forms. It could be like art. It could be in the form of art, like underground bands writing rap songs and people writing books and you like doing this podcast, right? And so everyone has their own role, like whether big or small. Like I want to just like focus on what I can do in this moment in time, what I can do, what skill can I bring, what skill sets can I bring to the world, and how do I, within my capacities, within the role that I have at Rise Travel Institute, or the role that I have as faculty, you know, in the graduate program, what can I do to continue to contribute in a meaningful way? So I'm not gonna like leave my job and then all of a sudden become like a frontline activist, because that's not my role, right? And I believe that I have a better way to contribute myself.
I think that's a very beautiful place for us to close today. One last question. Which place are you going to next?
Wow.
Chicago. You're going to Chicago to see me.
Oh, that's right. I'm going to Chicago to see you. Yes, in a couple weeks. That's exactly it. And then right after I'm going to Jerusalem with Meshdi tours with
Oh, you go with Meshdi. Oh,
I'm going with Meshdi. I'm going with Meshdi, and Aziz Abuzara is going to be on the trip as well.
I love Aziz. I love Aziz. I've met him several times and he's been on the podcast. That is really wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, I'm really excited because this is a special itinerary. This is not the typical dual narrative Israel-Palestine trip by Meshdi. It is an itinerary called Beyond the Headlines Mission Tour. And so this itinerary is specially designed for the participants to meet with families of victims of October 7th and trying to understand what has happened from the local people's perspective, and going to places and also like visit nonprofits in the peace building space and learn about conflict resolution and things like that. So I'm really looking forward to the experience, and hopefully I'll put together an article to share that experience with our community as well. Wow.
Amazing. Amazing. Vincie, what a conversation we had today. What a range we covered today. I want to thank you so much for coming for the show, and I can't wait to meet you in person again.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you for the time, and thank you for doing this podcast. It's so educational, and I hope people will have access to a lot more resources with which they can think more deeply about the issues that you talk about on your podcast. Thank you.
Going Places shares stories that help us imagine a better way to live, create, and travel. We are located on the traditional unceded Anishinaabe homeland. Our lovely new theme music is Altercations by Matt Nicholson at Big Score Audio. Our editor is Luciana Boss. We are reader supported. Take care and safe travels.